Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. Let's deal with the infinite hotel paradox. The infinite hotel paradox is a paradox created by David Hilbert in 1924, and he called it the paradox of the Grand Hotel. It's an important paradox because some may attempt to use it to prove that God doesn't have infinite power. So, imagine a fully occupied hotel with an infinite number of rooms. Um, this hotel may still accommodate additional guests. So, how is this possible? Uh, Suppose a new guest arrives and wishes to be accommodated in this hotel, which is full. Well, what you can do is you can simultaneously move the guest currently in room 1 to room 2, then the guest currently in room 2 to room 3, and so on, moving every guest from his current room to room n plus 1. So whatever his room number is plus 1. You move him there. Uh, you do this for the infinite number of rooms, and amazingly, room 1 is now unoccupied, and you can put your new arrived guests in room 1. If you have an infinite number of new arrivals, you can even accommodate them, despite the fact that the infinite hotel is fully occupied. So, how would you do that? Uh, you just move the person occupying room 1 to room 2, then the guest occupying room 2 to room 4, and in general, the guest occupying room n to room 2 times n, or 2n. And what will happen is all the odd number rooms will be free for the new guests. So every odd number room is empty and the even number rooms are occupied. Everybody in the hotel still gets a room, and you can accommodate even an infinite number of new arrivals. So, how is this possible? And the answer is it isn't. It's impossible. It's a paradox. But the point of the paradox is to show you that you can't have a hotel with an infinite number of rooms in it. Can't be done. If you did, uh, it wouldn't be true that there is a guest in every room and no more guests can be accommodated. Uh, so it's a paradox, and the point of it is to show that an infinite hotel is impossible. It's impossible. You can't have an infinite number of rooms. Um, Now, I'm going to give you a slightly different version of the infinite hotel paradox, which I call the Thanos paradox. Now, hopefully, you saw the movie Avengers Endgame, and you know who Thanos is. Thanos is the main villain in the movies, and what Thanos did during the movies is he collected the Infinity Stones so that he could depopulate the universe instantaneously with the snap of his fingers in order to save it from overpopulation. Um, so maybe there was an easier way for him to do this besides killing half the people in the universe. This would be the Thanos paradox. So suppose there is an infinite number of planets with people, and each planet is overfilled to capacity with people so that there is only enough water for 80% of the people who are on any given planet. The remaining 20% of the people are dying from thirst. We can label these planets A, B, C, D, E, F, G to infinity. Okay. So the next set would be A, B, B, C, C, and the next set after that would be A, B, 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 C, C, C. But you can continue to label them for infinity. So what you could do is you could take all the people from planet B and take them off planet B. Then put everyone on planet A on planet B. Now take everyone off of planet C and put everyone from planet B onto planet C. Now take everyone off of planet D and put them on planet C. No, put everyone from planet C onto planet D. Continue in such a fashion. Then what we now have is planet A empty, but all the other planets B, D, C, E onto infinity would be occupied. So it's just like the infinite hotel paradox, where you open up the first room by shuffling everybody to n+1 rooms, in this case n+1 planets. Now proceed as follows. Take everyone off of planet D and put everyone who was on planet C on planet D. Then take everyone who was on planet D and put them on planet E, after removing the people from planet E. Continue in such a fashion. We now have planet A empty, and planet C is empty, but all the other planets, B, D, E, F, G, H, I to infinity, is now full. So we've opened up planet A and planet C. Well, you can continue doing that in a similar manner to planet every other planet. So n to n, just like the infinite hotel paradox. So C, E, so that planets A, C, E, G, etc. have no people, and planets B, D, F, H, etc. have all the people. So this is just like the infinite hotel paradox, where you're opening up all the odd numbered rooms, or all the odd numbered planets, so that you can accommodate an infinite number of new arrivals. You can do the same thing, but with infinite number of planets. So you've done that. Every other planet is now empty. So then what you do is you take half the population of the occupied planets and you put them on the unoccupied planets. So what you end up with is you have every planet occupied, but with half as many people as before. So now everybody can get a drink of water, because you've depopulated each planet by half. So since the water supply could satisfy 80% of the previous population, but now you've cut the population in half. Now there's plenty of water for everybody, and nobody is thirsty. And you didn't kill anybody, unlike Thanos, who thought he had to kill everybody. So you solved the problem. So the question is, well, why didn't Thanos do this? I mean, he wasn't that bad a guy. I mean, he thought he had to kill half the universe. But why didn't he just do this little shuffling bit among an infinite number of planets? And everybody would have been able to survive and thrive by just reducing the populations of every planet by half, by just shuffling everybody along an infinite number of planets. I mean, each planet has only half as many people as before, but has the same resources as before. There's plenty of water for everyone now, whereas before there were millions of people dying of thirst. But it's the same number of planets and the same number of people. So why didn't Thanos follow this plan? Okay, and there's a reason. Thanos knew that there couldn't be an infinite number of planets in the universe. So the Thanos paradox only works if there's actually an infinite number of planets in the universe. And Thanos knew that there couldn't be. In fact, the paradox proves to you that there can't be an infinite number of planets or an infinite number of rooms in a hotel. So Thanos knew this isn't going to work, because there isn't an infinite number of planets in the universe. Why can't there be an infinite number of planets in the universe? Besides, it would create this paradox. Well, because the universe has to begin. So time has to begin. So there has to be a beginning to the universe. And we know this because there's the Big Bang, which is the beginning of the universe. So there's a beginning point, so there's only a finite amount of time in which to grow a finite number of planets. So regardless of how much time has been traversed since the beginning of the universe, there would always be a finite amount of time in which to grow a number of planets. So there would only ever be a finite number of planets. You could never have an infinite number of planets. So Thanos knew this, but someone said to Thanos, well, you got the Infinity Stones, you got your glove, you can snap your fingers, you could do miraculous things. Well, what about an infinite number of other universes? Couldn't you do this shuffling act among an infinite number of other universes? Why can't you use the Infinity Stones to do that? And Thanos is like, well, because I can't go to those other universes, so that's not going to work either. So Thanos um, uh, knew he couldn't pull this trick off even with the Infinity Stones because he couldn't go to these other universes and he couldn't send people from one universe into another universe because that would be a violation of the law of conservation of energy and mass. If somebody leaves a universe, their mass and energy would leave the universe, which is a violation of the conservation uh, of energy and mass in the universe. So it's a violation of the fundamental laws of physics. So Thanos knew he was smart. He knew the laws of physics, and he knew that even the Infinity Stones couldn't send people outside one universe into another universe due to the conservation of energy and mass. So Thanos essentially had no other choice but to just depopulate the universe with the snap of his fingers. Um, so the question is, well, Thanos couldn't do this, but could God do it? Could God do it? God has infinite power. And what does this mean? Well, this means that God could theoretically create an infinite number of finite universes. The universe would be finite in the sense that it has a beginning and it can only have a finite number of things in it, planets, for instance. But God could make an infinite number of those finite universes. God could create an infinite multiverse if God wanted to, because God's power is infinite. Um, but if God if God could shuffle people from one universe to another universe, and there's an infinite number of universes, then theoretically God could do the Thanos paradox, even though Thanos couldn't, because Thanos is controlled by the laws of physics, but God isn't. But if God could perform the Thanos paradox, um, that would mean that an infinite number of finite universes was an impossibility. Because that's the point of the paradox, to prove that an infinite hotel is impossible. Or that, in the case of the Thanos paradox, to prove that an infinite number of universes is impossible. So, uh, if an infinite number of universes is impossible, then God's power could not be infinite in this sense to be able to create an infinite number of finite universes. So, if God could pull off the Thanos paradox, that would prove that God's power is not infinite and is in fact finite because you can't create an infinite number of universes under the Thanos paradox. unless there's a way out of the Thanos paradox for God. And good thing there is. And I'll tell you what it is. God is uncaused. That means that God is not made of parts, and that God is not subject to time. Time would allow the changing of parts. God doesn't have parts, so God is not subject to time. Um, because God is not subject to time, uh, God's creation of other universes is also not subject to time. So even though God could create an infinite number of finite universes, there is no God time or multiversal time in which these multiple universes are created. So it's not like this. I mean, if you imagine separate universes um, created within a common multiversal time. So that's not the case. There isn't a common multiversal time in which to create universes. God is not subject to time. So when God creates, if God creates multiple universes, even an infinite number of them, these universes are not created within something called God time or multiversal time because God is not subject to time. So God doesn't have this time to do this. God couldn't create this time because God is not subject to time. He's uncaused. Um, so, assuming God were to create an infinite number of finite universes, uh, there would be no um, between time uh, among these universes. God would make them, but God's creation would not be subject to time. So, because of that, there literally is no time in between universes. There's literally no time in which God could swap people in and out of universes. So God couldn't swap people in and out of universes, even an infinite number of universes, such that the Thanos paradox would apply. God can't do it because there's no time to do it. There's no God time or multiversal time because God is not subject to time. So he couldn't do it. Now, does that mean God is not all powerful? No. It's an impossibility for God because God is uncaused. God is not subject to time. God can't change that which is uncaused. Not even God can change the uncaused. So uh, there is no God time. There's no multiversal time, and because of this, God cannot swap between um, multiverses, between universes, and therefore he could never do something like the Thanos paradox because there would have to be a multiverse or a uh, multiversal time in order to do the swapping. And there is no such thing because God is not subject to time. So it couldn't be done. God couldn't do it. Not because of some sort of paradox, but because there's no time in which to do it. So um, the Thanos paradox doesn't apply to God because God is not subject to time. So God could, in fact, create an infinite number of finite universes. His power is infinite in that sense. And the Thanos paradox does not prove that an infinite number of universes could not be created because God is not subject to the Thanos paradox, because God is not subject to time and couldn't do the swapping necessary for the paradox to prove that an infinite number of universes would be impossible. See? Um, So these are fun paradoxes, but they underlie a very important uh, point about God. And that is God's power is infinite in his ability to create an infinite number of finite universes. And these paradoxes do not prove that an infinite number of universes is impossible. So they don't prove that God's power has to be finite. Not at all, because God is not subject to time. Unlike Thanos, who is subject to time. So, uh, I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Please press the subscribe button. I appreciate it. And take care, all you Avengers.